Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya wal Mursaleen wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in wa man walahum bi ihsanin ila yawmiddin. Amma ba'd, Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. Rabbi yassir wa la tu'assir wa tammim bil khair wa bika nasta'in ya Fattah. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا اللهم ذكرنا منه ما نسينا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Just continuing on from yesterday, where we just started to talk about and discuss zakat, because it's a very integral part of how we generally spend Ramadan. Even though zakat is not compulsory to give in Ramadan, it could be compulsory at any time of the year, depending on your situation. But we have a habit, and we have a general habit, a general norm of people that they like giving in Ramadan, which is understandable as well, because Ramadan brings different types of blessings and so on, so forth, and giving and fulfilling a compulsory fard action during Ramadan, like the hadith mentions, is multiplied sab'un. It's multiplied by 70, right? Because of that, it can be understood that why a person wants to give zakat during Ramadan. So we left off last time when we were talking about we were discussing how the cycle of zakat completes. And we talked about, okay, if you were to spend the full cycle of zakat, 1 year needs to pass by from the first date to the second date, so on and so forth. Now, today we're going to start by discussing what assets do I have, what things and items do I have that zakat needs to be given on, and what are non-zakatable assets, what items are there that I do not need to give zakat on. So, but the first thing is zakatable assets. In order to judge whether an asset is zakatable or not, once again, zakatable is a word we're making up for our own conversation. There's actually not a word in English language. It's that's zakatable. But how do I know that my wealth, which of my wealth is should I give zakat on and which I shouldn't? So there are certain conditions to that wealth. Right. The first thing is that wealth needs to be fully owned. By this, it means that it's not something that is an arbitrary, you're owning something. So for something to be fully owned, the example is, like you can own a full share, but what it can't be is that person owns it and simultaneously I own it. No, it needs to be yours. It can't be just something that somebody has said that, oh, I'm thinking of giving this to you. Or even an example, ownership is transferred by qabdah. In Shariat, ownership is transferred by possession. Right? So for example, somebody wants to give an hadiyah. So they say to you, I want to give you $1,000 in gift. So they've said that. You do not actually own that $1,000 yet, even though they've said that, or they promised you that, but you don't own it. You will only own that gift when and until they give it to you and you possess it. Right? So there needs to be full ownership of the wealth. So that, let's say somebody said that to you, and now you're sitting and calculating zakat, and you're wondering, should I give zakat on the $1,000 that are promised to me as a gift? Right? Should I? No. Some person is these are examples just to understand the concept of ownership. Right? Again, some person is almost passing away, and that person passing away says that out of my remaining wealth, 1/3 of that wealth, right, or let's just say an amount, $2,000 of my wealth, I want to bequeath and I want to give wasiyat to my niece or whoever, this so-and-so person. Now this so-and-so person is sitting there trying to calculate their zakat, right? But until that person passes away and that wealth is given to that person, that wealth is considered not owned, right? So the person passes away, but the inheritance is not distributed, right? So undistributed inheritance is considered as not owned. So fully owning means that there is possession of that wealth, or it's a debt that is very highly likely to have possession in it as well, as we'll learn in the section of debt, right? The second condition for wealth is that it needs to be in excess of personal needs. Now, what does that mean is like clothing, household furniture, utensils, cars, all of these things that are for personal use, they do not count. But if I have clothing, household furniture, utensils, cars, all of the above in a business and I want to sell them, they're no longer for personal need or personal use, right? In that case, there will be zakat on the value of those things because they are known as business stock, as we'll discuss in about 2-3 slides, how to give zakat on business stock, right? And then the third thing is that wealth, it was fully owned by me, right? And it was in excess of my personal needs, right? And after it being that, right, after that happened, I had the nisab. Then the nisab stayed, regardless of the wealth changing. Fluctuations happen all the time in wealth, right? Or regardless of the fluctuations happening during the year, or regardless of that excess wealth and personal needs being sold. For example, I had clothing that was excess from my personal use that was meant for sale. That is actually meant for sale in my business. Now that piece of cloth I sold, right? And I bought another few other pieces of cloth. But when the year ended, that cloth culminatively, the stock of that was the amount of nisab, the amount was a quantum, like we discussed yesterday. That amount needs to be, the zakat needs to be given, because that is clothing, that is thing. So what needs to happen is 1 lunar year basically needs to pass for that person in the condition that at the end of the lunar year, there he has nisab, right? He has nisab. So like we discussed in the cycle portion, the nisab was set, the first date ever was set on the first time the nisab came in, right? And then every year that date followed. So if every year that date comes and the person has nisab, then that person will need to give zakat. So that wealth needs to have that 1 year passing by on it. And the last thing is the wealth needs to be of a productive nature, right? Meaning that it can derive profit and benefit from. What this basically means is, this is in the fiqh, in the books of fiqh and in hadith and the aqwal of sahaba and so on, you will find the word numu, noon, meme, and wow, numu, al-malun nami, right? Why? What does this mean is basically this wealth inherently has the ability to grow and to profit and benefit, right? So monetary wealth like gold, silver, cash, all of these things, inherently Shariat has dictated that inherently they are considered of a productive nature. Once again, over here, one disclaimer that we need to understand is Shariat needs to consider it productive, right? Shariat needs to consider it of a productive nature, not what you and I dictate is of a productive nature. Something might be a benefit for me, something might be a benefit for you, like that. But if Shariat says that it's a beneficial thing, or it has a profit and benefit based system, or it has a numu based system, it has a system that, you know, it increases on its own, then that thing is considered as a productive nature based wealth that can be utilized for zakat. So it has a productive nature. Now, after seeing these conditions, and we know these conditions from the hadith and so on, right? What do we come? What is our conclusion? What are the assets that can be that are there? Like, so these are the conditions of the wealth. And now based on these conditions, we derive some common assets that everybody has, right? Common assets that everybody has that is zakatable, that needs to be, the zakat needs to be given on them. right? Gold and silver in any form, whether they be in bullions, whether they be in bars, whether they be in the bank, whether they be in the safety deposit boxes or under my mattress, right? Or in the form of jewelry, right? uh, Now when it comes to jewelry, what do we need to take care of is that gold and silver is not always pure, right? So you might have a jewelry that is not pure. And what I mean here is, what you have to understand here is, I'm not talking about that something that is separable. I'm talking inseparable impurity, meaning two different types of metals were melted and together, right? So in order to create one type of jewelry, like you have 18 karat gold, 20 karat gold, 24 karat gold, things like this, right? They are impure golds. 18 karat, I believe, is impure gold, right? The reason behind that is because there is something added to it to make the price go less, because gold costs more than copper, or gold costs more than nickel, gold costs more than iron. So something is added to that gold when it's been melted, in order for that gold to be to have a value, right? So when they're inseparable, when it's an inseparable thing, and you know that it's not pure, right? Then what do? You see which metal is more. If the gold is more, if 51% is gold and 49% is something else, right? Then 51% gold will mean that the whole entire thing is considered gold, right? And ulama ulama generally want to be in the more safe side. So what do is even 50-50. If 50% is gold, you consider that as it is a full gold amount. It is a full gold amount, right? So gold and silver in any form, if it's not pure, meaning inseparable, not purity, inseparable impurity, right? Then you see which metal is more. If the non silver gold metal is more, then the item will be considered as non zakatable. But if it is the gold and silver is more, then the item will be considered as a zakatable item. And you can easily figure out if your item is not, if you just go to a jeweler and ask them, I want to figure out how much carat gold this is, or something like that, and they have their various means and methods of figuring out those things, right? Then uh, so if it's separable, then separate them. For example, you have a pendant, right? The inside of the pendant is gold, and the outside of the pendant is iron, and you can see the gold, and you know that the iron can be separated from the gold because it's not melted together. The gold bud is probably, or the gold gem, or whatever you want to call it, is just like a stone inset into the iron body. Because it's inset, this gold can be separated from the iron itself. So the iron is technically considered separate, and the gold is considered separate because it's separable. So if it is separable, you should separate and then count for that. So generally jewelers can do that for you. But let's say you're in the nick of time, you cannot, then count the whole thing as a gold thing, and give the zakat. Generally it's not gonna be much, right? I mean, like 2.5% is, anyways, it's very little, right? But generally it's not going to be. But if you feel that, for example, your gold pendant is like, maybe a few grams, or one and a half, 2-3 grams, let's say the pendant at the bottom is 2 grams, but you have this massive string on top that weighs about like 15 grams, right? The string is made of like fake of imitation jewelry or whatever, and you know that this is imitation and this is real, then you should separate it. Because what happens is that it's a very big discrepancy. It'll count as if you were counting 20 grams of gold, when that's actually not the case, because 20 grams of gold, when converted into cash in calculating zakat, means a lot of gold, right? As compared to just the pendant, which was about 3 grams, and the 3 gram pendant ended up costing you about 20 grams, which is obviously doesn't make any sense. So if it's separable in that case, then you separate it, and you consider them two separate things. So one you will not give because it's not gold or silver, and the other one you will give because it is gold or silver, right? Another thing is sometimes, gold is, you have gold that is, uh, it's like gold plated. Gold plated, like you'll see in the next slide, is not a zakatable asset. Gold plated is not a zakatable asset, as long as what is underneath the plating is not silver. So if you have a silver thing that is gold plated, so you have silver that is gold plated, it's considered silver. It's considered silver. So you should make sure with your jeweler or wherever you bought it from, or if sometimes somebody gives you a gift, we have to, just as a side note, I know we're not talking about this, but when we give gifts, we should also consider the repercussions we're giving to others by giving this gift, right? So we should tell them straight. Like we got, there was somebody that gifted some gold, right, to us, right? And I love this person for doing this. They actually mentioned in their gift box that, this is gold, but not all of it is gold. So how it is the bottom of it is like this and the top of it is like this, and the jeweler has said that this is the amount of grams of gold it is. And at the bottom it just said, this is just so that you can your zakat calculations become easy. So that is, I have the utmost respect for that person that did that, right? Because they were worried, not just, oh, I want to tell you, oh, I'm giving you gold, I'm doing this. No, they were worried that, you're going to end up having to give zakat down the road in 1 year or so, or whenever, right? And you'll have this random gift sitting here and you won't even know whether you should be giving zakat, whether it's gold or not, or how much gold it is, or things like this. And you're going to have to find a jeweler and that appraisal it and so on and so forth and all this. So like you can say in our in just regular speak, I have mad respect for that person, right? A lot of utmost respect for that person who did that. So we have to be habitual of this. So sometimes you have a gold plated thing, right, which is silver underneath. So the silver, it will count, right? The gold plating is not enough to overpower the silver anyways. It generally won't be, right? Or you have white gold on gold content, right? So if you have white gold on gold content, that counts as a zakatable asset, right? Because the white gold on top didn't change what was inside. It's still gold, right? So as long as you could have gold and then it's plated by bronze. I don't know why, or you would just want a certain effect, or it has a certain thing, whatever the case may be. But as long as the content itself is gold, it will count towards the asset of giving zakat. So gold plating, big no-no. You don't need to give on gold plating unless if the plating is done upon gold or upon silver, right? And white gold plating on gold or silver content is still considered a thing, is still considered an asset that is zakatable. Next thing is, next thing would be that, a person has cash in any form. Cash in any form is considered as a zakatable asset, right? So cash, you have it in your house, you have it in a bundle, you have it in your bank, you have it, you gave it to somebody to keep, and then you were like, I'll take it from you you gave it as an amana, you gave it for safekeeping, not as a loan, but you gave it for safekeeping. Loans we'll discuss later, but you gave it as safekeeping, and you told them, just keep this in your house in the safe that you have, because I don't have a safe at home. You keep it and I'll take it from you as I need. So this person put it away. Now that amount that's sitting in their safe, you also have to give zakat on, because you own it, right? So it's fully owned. It's it is of a productive nature. Cash is considered of a productive nature, and then the 1 year has passed over it, and also cash is considered as excess of personal needs. It is considered as monetary, right? It is considered that it is for the usage of giving and buying and things like that, right? So in that case, cash is considered in any form, whatever form. You can have it in your savings account, in your checkings account, in whatever type of account you have, and wherever you have it, it doesn't matter. You have to. Sometimes cash is inaccessible. For example, you have given it to somebody, but you can only access it 10, 15, 20 days after, or 30 days after, 50 days after, taking out a certain amount of the from your checking account. You're only able, you have an account at there are accounts where you're only allowed to take out $5,000 per week or $10,000 per week. Regardless, you're only allowed to take that much, right? Does not mean that you do not own that much, right? So you own 10,000, but you're only allowed to take 1,000. So that 10,000 is still yours. You just can't take it out all at once, right? And we'll discuss about RRSPs and RESPs and things like that. People have those pension plans going on and different types of musharaka schemes or ijara schemes that are Islamic financing schemes. We'll discuss that inshallah tomorrow or next week, where we have like a thing. So there's an entire thing prepared for that. But just for now, what you need to understand is cash in any form, it is zakatable, right? Regardless of how it is, whether I can access it or not, right? Now, merchandise for business and sale. So merchandise purchased for business and sale, it's sitting there, I haven't even sold it, is zakatable. How do you calculate the prices of those things? We'll discuss that in a different slide. But that merchandise for business and sale is zakatable. And how do you, what you need to just remember is that merchandise for sale, if together it does not equal, let's say, it does not equal the zakat amount, right? It does not equal the zakat amount, but together with your personal assets, personal zakatable assets, it equals the nisab. Then you need to do it together, right? You cannot just leave the business on one side and say, no, the business didn't have to give zakat, but I did, or I don't have to give zakat and the business. Why? Because separately, both of them do not equal the nisab. But that's not the case. They give, you mix them together and you give zakat on both the wealth, right? So let's say you own a share. We'll also discuss that if you're in a partnership, inshallah. I'm not gonna go into that right now because we need to finish this slide. Income from properties given on lease. So you have a property, you bought it, you're not planning to sell the property. There's a difference. You bought the property to sell, that's different. You bought the property to lease. Property to lease, the value of that property to lease is not zakatable, but the income from the property given on lease is zakatable, right? It will be zakatable. So the income coming from the rent that you're collecting from the property you have given on lease, right? That income is zakatable. And income derived from a rental type business. So for example, you're giving crockery on rent. Plates, this, that, event planners, they give those things on rent all the time. Or you're giving tables and this and that, such things, they're giving on rent, right? So all these type of things that are there, they are their income is considered as a zakatable amount, right? As compared to giving zakat on that specific thing. So what you will not do is you won't calculate their value. You will calculate their income derived from them, because they are used to run a business, right? They're used to run a business as compared to those items being sold. So you're not selling the crockery, you're giving it to rent. So the income coming from the rent is the thing that will be there, as compared to if you were a store and you were just selling crockery, spoons, and so on and so forth, then it will be different. Same thing applies to a rental car business. The car is not being sold. If the car was being sold, then the income, then the value of the car would be looked at, as compared to when the car is being rented, the income derived from the rental of that car, that will be considered zakatable. And then you have zakat on animals and livestock. Obviously, animals and livestock zakat is not easy to calculate. Animals, livestock, and produce, right? Agricultural produce, actually, not the ushar and so on and so forth that you need to give. So animals, livestock, and ushar from the livestock produce, right? Those things don't generally pertain to people in Canada, America. in our areas. Maybe in Pakistan, Bangladesh, or in Muslim countries where Muslims own farms and this and that and so on and so forth. Over here, we don't have too many farm owners that are working like this. So I had to make a judgment call, and I was like, animal, livestock, and agricultural zakat that you need to give. We're kind of skip that and get into the cash and so on. So zakat that we give, because generally most of the people here are giving that type of zakat. Otherwise, animal, livestock, and there's material available online as well. But what I recommend is this type of zakat calculation is not easy. It's quite difficult. This is why in Islamic history, people used to be made they used to be trained in calculating livestock and agricultural zakat. They used to go to the farms and things like that and then calculate the zakat and say that, okay, you own all of these, but your zakat is going to be this much, and I'll be back on this and this day to collect it. Okay. So then they would come back and he would collect the zakat on behalf of the Islamic government, and then and things would go like that, as compared to leave it to him and just calculate, because it's not that easy deciding what is what and what is not, and so on and so forth. So I generally recommend, if you have livestock or things like that, or somebody lives here but owns livestock back home somewhere, right? I met one brother. He was from Somalia. He was from Ethiopia. Very, very nice brother, mashallah. And he said that, I don't know who to ask this, because nobody talks about this. I own about 300 camels back home. What do I do? I was like, oh, subhanallah, I never thought I would be sitting in Canada and I would have to give an answer to a question on somebody owning camels. I did not. I honestly did not. You kind of lose track of that. But then I gave him the answer that, you'll have to do so and so thing, and that's how you will calculate your zakat. So that's that. So next, these are zakatable assets. But what about non-zakatable assets? Right. So the first thing is metals beside gold and silver, they're non-zakatable. So you have something made of, copper, steel, these type of things, nothing. Right. So, you have your silverware, which we call silverware, which is made of silver. It's spoons, so on and so forth. Right. Silverware made of silver. Otherwise, silverware is a term used generally to mean spoons and so on and so forth. Spoons, forks, knives, the soup spoon and this and that, and ladles and whatnot. But silverware made of actual silver or gold, right? That is zakatable. But silverware made of not silver or not gold, right, is not zakatable. So you don't have to give zakat on that, and you will not use that to calculate for the zakat. Fixtures and fittings of a shop. What does that mean is that you have a shop, and your shop has certain things that are used in order to run your business, right? Now, those things that are used to run your business, right, they generally they're not zakatable. They're not zakatable. So you don't have to give zakat on them. So you have lights in your shop, you have you have benches, tables, and machinery and things like this, not zakatable, as long as all of these things are not for sale. If you have a shop we sell lights, you sell lights, so all the lights that you are selling, they are zakatable. But all the lights that are there just to light up your shop, they're not zakatable. So sometimes it's misconveyed. So people are like, oh, I don't have to give zakat on lights, so I have a shop that only sells lights, so I don't have to give zakat. That's not how it is. It's to consider that you do not have you're not selling that item, right? Those items that are not for sale, right, or are not being produced or are not being manufactured for sale, right, they are generally not zakatable, right? And then car, truck, or delivery vehicles used in running a business, also not zakatable, because the car, truck, delivery services are not for sale in that business. Diamonds, pearls, or precious or semi-precious stones, all of them not zakatable, right? So if you have a gold ring or a silver ring, let's say you have a silver ring with a huge diamond on top, right? So the diamond itself, not zakatable, but the silver underneath it, absolutely zakatable, right? Or you have a pearl necklace. The pearl necklace, it has silver wire. Now this is apparently a new thing that's going on. I'm not sure if it's been for a while, but this is something that I found new. it's called silver wire. What basically it is, it's just a necklace with instead of string, it is used as silver. So the silver wire is zakatable, but the pearls on the silver wire are not. And if you cannot separate them, let's say for example they're attached to it and you cannot separate them, then the whole entire thing will be zakatable, right? It will be considered zakatable if the wire is more than the pearl, the weight of the pearl. So let's say you have 3 pearls and this huge silver wire running around, then obviously the wire will have more than the 3 little pearls that you have. So that entire thing will be considered as zakatable, right? If you cannot separate them. If you can separate them, then that's a different story. Then you have to separate them and calculate them separately. Houses, furniture, crockery, clothing, and vehicles for person, anything in the personal use sector. You could have 50 houses. Look, Islam does not say be extravagant, right? Islam does not it does not go to you and say that being extravagant is not a problem. No, right? It does not justify extravagance basically, right? But let's say somebody has 4 houses, right? So you have a lot of people, anyone who knows anyone who has more than one wife, right? Generally they have 2 houses or 2 places where the wife is. So one wife will live here, the other wife will live there, something like that, right? So in that case, if they own both the houses, doesn't matter, right? Both houses, for all furniture in both houses, crockery in both houses, clothing and vehicles, all of these things, they are not for personal use, right? If they are for personal use, then they are not zakatable. But if they're not for personal use and intended for business use, the opposite of personal use generally is business use. So if they're intended for business use, right, then in that case scenario, they will be zakatable. So any house you own for the purpose of selling, right? You own a house and you want to sell it, right? And you put it on the market. Now you're waiting for a response and you're not using the house. See, look, if you were living in that house and that's the only place you're living until the house gets sold, that house is not zakatable. But if you're not living in the house and that house was bought for the purpose of selling, then that house, the value of that house in the market right now needs to be calculated and zakat needs to be given on that house. Things like that. Then the principle will continue. Imitation jewelry, right? Imitation jewelry, no zakat. You don't need to give zakat on imitation jewelry, fake jewelry basically. Fake jewelry just means it's not gold or silver, right? Value on properties of lease. Like I mentioned before, income from the properties on lease, you have to give zakat on. But the value of that property which was leased to somebody else, you do not have to give zakat on that. Electronic appliances, as long as that entire now you have a golden phone where everything in that phone, mashallah, is made of gold, you are going to have to give zakat on that phone. People buy these things. People get these things custom made. You hear all the time about this falan person and this person got this made and that made and so on and so forth, right? So they have so if it's actual gold, right, then it has to be not like gold plated, right? But if it's actual gold and they use gold to make the cover for the phone or something like that, you're gonna have to pay on that. But the electronic device itself, you probably won't. So you take the cover, separate it from the electronic device, calculate the weight of the cover because it's gold, and so on and so forth. Household appliances, you don't have to. Your microwave, your stove, these type of things, you wouldn't have to pay zakat on that. Gold plated jewelry, you don't have to pay because it's gold plated. Now gold plated jewelry, once again, like I mentioned, that little thing there, that gold plated jewelry, if it's not on gold or silver, if you're plating gold, if it's gold plated on gold to make the gold shinier or something, or if it's gold plated on silver to make it look like gold, then you'll have to pay zakat because the actual thing is gold or silver. But if it's not that case and it's just gold plating on iron or steel or something, then you don't have to pay zakat on that. Now, business assets and stock. So in business, you have certain commodities that are there. Now, what commodities are considered by Shariat that are zakatable? So I have a business, and like I mentioned, business assets and stock, those commodities, that are purchased for resale. So items that are purchased for resale. So I bought, shirts and pants and so on and so forth, and I bought them for the sake that I will sell them in my business. Then all of those are known as zakatable commodities of the business. Now, when they're zakatable, they need to be they need to be calculated. And how we'll calculate, I'll just explain that. So when you have a commodity in business, it's going to be an item that was purchased for resale. Now, types of assets in a business generally are either they're fixed assets like machinery, buildings, furniture. You own 3 buildings because you have a factory line or something, or you own some machinery, or you own some furniture for the business, lighting, this and that, like I explained before. All of these things are known as fixed assets. Fixed assets in a business are non-zakatable, and current assets are the are opposite of that. Current assets are things in the business that are changing, right? Cash comes in and out. Stock in trade, meaning you have some stock here that you need to resell, you need to get rid of. Receivables, you sold to somebody and they have to give you back, right? Or you have given the payment to someone, but they haven't given you the thing yet. So because you've given the payment and they're going to give you the thing, and that receivable item is coming in, you need to calculate the value of that receivable item and give zakat on that, right? So now, how do you calculate the value of a stock? If you have some stock left over, and this is all that's left over for today on the day that you had zakat, right? So what do? You look at the market price of that stock. The market price of that stock, and based on that you calculate. Let's say you had 50 shirts, 20 pants, and 30 hoodies, right? All of these things are on the day that you have to give zakat. You calculate the market price of all of this is about $3,000. I'm just ballparking a number here, but $3,000, and that amount of money needs to be calculated into zakat. Now, let's say you have a manufacturing issue, meaning you manufacture goods. So you take raw materials and you're manufacturing. So you have 2 types. You have unfinished goods sitting there because it's on the day of, there are some unfinished goods, and then there are some finished goods. Finished goods need to be calculated based on the sale price. Based on the sale price. So what you're selling at, because you are a manufacturer, there is no market like yours. You're a manufacturer of something that is yours. You do it. You don't replicate somebody else's, or you don't pick up somebody else's thing. So you only know what the sale price of that is, that you regularly. So it will be your general sale price at which you're selling at, that, for the finished goods. And for unfinished goods, let's say they're in the middle of manufacturing, they're not finished yet, then the market price will be utilized to know whether how much of zakat to give or not. Now, sometimes businesses are a partnership. One person owns 10%, the other person owns 60%, and the other person owns 30%. And like that, it's 100% of the business. Now there's 3 people. So in a partnership, the rule is very simple: to each his own, right? Basically, what we need to understand it as is as a percentage amount. So to each his percentage share, right? So if you own 10% and this person owns 50%, then all the stock, when it's put together and so on and so forth, Shariat will consider it that you own 10% and your partner owns 50% of that stock, and the other one owns 40% of that stock. Right? So you have to give 10% zakat. This person has to give 50%. This person has to give 40%. So like that, 3 people owning a business can be understood. Now, let's say, for example, you give your zakat on the 10% and they still have to give zakat. If one of you gives zakat alone, separately, right, then that person is his buddy, meaning he is absolved of the obligation of fulfilling that zakat for that amount, right? So what they will have to do is they will just have to give the zakat on their thing. But if, let's say, you calculated your personal zakat alone and you're calculating business zakat alone, because separately, because the partnership is it gets really difficult to calculate it all together. So what they do is the partnership decides that we will calculate the stock zakat together, and based on that give it, right? Then it's all right. what will happen is you will give 10%, they will give 40, 50 or something like that, and all the stock is put together. The zakat is taken out from the money from the bank that the business owns. So the business is a legal entity, so the legal entity owns something, and then they take it out and then they give the zakat. That'll be fine, and all the partners will be absolved from it. As compared to if, let's say, one of the partners says that, I am unable to give zakat. Why? Because my personal assets do not allow me to give zakat because it's less than the nisab, right? In that case, what will be considered is if his share of the business put together with his share of the personal is equal to or greater than the nisab, then he will have to give zakat. If not, then these two parties will give zakat on their shares alone, because they, including their personal, have to give it like that. So the shares are generally considered as a separate thing, but if they wish to give it together, they can also give it together. Debts receivable. So now, because we talked about zakat and zakatable items, non-zakatable items, so you have there are two types of debts basically. One debt is that which is receivable, meaning the creditor has given to the debtor and the debtor now owes money to the creditor basically. So person A, Zaid, gave to Amr $5,000, and now Amr has to give Zaid $5,000 back. In this case, Zaid would be the debtor. Zaid would be the creditor, and Amr would be the debtor. So now, looking at it from the perspective of the creditor, debts are receivable, and there are three types of debts. How? Strong debt, weak debt, and bad debt. Actually, there's four: strong, medium, weak, and debt. But for the purpose of our conversation, we're just going to focus on strong, weak, and bad, right? Strong debt can be defined as monetary wealth given on loan or merchandise sold on terms of payment receivable after 1 or 2 years is known as strong receivable debt. So Zaid gave $5,000 to Amr and said that within a year I want it back, or within 11 months I want it back, within 5 weeks I want it back, right? So these are receivable within 1 year of time, right? Or Zaid has a business and he bought and he sold some of his merchandise on the condition that this person is going to pay him back, right? Within 1 year or 2 years. In that case scenario, these are known as strong debt, right? Strong receivable debt, meaning you're going to get that money back to you. You're going to receive. You're in the receiving end of the debt. So what's the ruling? The creditor must pay zakat on a strong receivable debt. So if the debt is strong, if the receivable debt is strong, then the creditor has to pay zakat on that debt. Now, sometimes what happens is, let's say, you have installment payments. The general rule with installments is that, 1 year of installments you have to. So let's say you set up installment for, for strong debts, the case is, let's say you set up installments. So in the case where this loan is repaid in installments, if the repayment received equals to 1/5, 20% of the nisab, zakat of this 1/5 becomes fard. If the repayment reaches 1/5, 20%, then zakat of that 1/5 becomes compulsory. And then onwards, how much ever he continues to receive, he will have to give zakat on that, right? If several years have passed, then zakat must be given for all the past years, right? All the past years zakat needs to be given, right? So and then you have the second type of receivable debt, which is weak. It's a weak type of receivable debt, the definition of which is debts receivable arising without the exchange of tangible goods. For example, you were working for somebody, you were an employee, right? You're an employee and your employer still owes you money. These unpaid wages. These are, you didn't give him anything in return for which he's giving you, but you worked for him. So services rendered. So services rendered, he owes you money. right? Or you're the landlord and you haven't really given the person money, but he's living in your house, because of which he's giving you rent. So that rent is unpaid, right? These would be examples of weak debt, right? Or the woman, the wife still needs to be given her dowry, her mahar. So the husband has not paid the mahar either fully, or there's some left, the promised mahar. Or bequest payment. So for example, somebody told you, like I mentioned before as well, somebody said that, I'm going to give you this much as gift, or I'm passing away this much, I'm leaving you as wasiyat. Until you get that payment, it's considered weak, right? You haven't gotten it yet. So weak debt, what's the ruling behind it? Is that the creditor does not have to pay zakat on a weak receivable debt until receipt of assets. Until the person has gotten the assets in his hand, he does not have to give it. Now, zakat is not another thing to note here is, so let's say, you're not getting paid, the wages that you're supposed to get, you didn't get paid for about 3 years now. So the 3 years accumulative wages, you do not have to pay debt on. You do not have to pay zakat on, right? So means, like, after 3 years, this person says, okay, here you go, right? Here's 3 years worth of wages. This is $60,000 I owed you, and here you go, 60, 70, whatever amount of dollars I owed you. Here you go. Now, right? This amount that I've given you, do I have to pay for the last 3 years, right? No, you do not have to pay for the last 3 years. You will have to pay for that when your zakat cycle comes in. When the date of your zakat is due, then you'll have to give that. So if your zakat cycle comes in after 1 year, so be it. If your zakat cycle comes in the next day, so this person hands you $60,000, $70,000, and your zakat cycle comes in the next day, that $60,000 zakat needs to be given on. Why? Because you were considered that you should be giving zakat anyways for the whole year, because you had the nisab that came in before. If that is a person, if it's a brand new person who just got into the nisab of zakat, then he will have to wait for the year, meaning that he had $10 and then all of a sudden he has 60,000. So now he finally he's now finally able to pay zakat. He now has to wait 1 year before, and then at the end of the year he has to see he has nisab or not, like we discussed last time. Now, sometimes the debt is bad. It's bad debt, right? Bad debt comes in 3 situations, right? The debtor can either acknowledge the debt, right? You just have to actually, this is not a sense of bad debt, but it's actually, what I'm trying to say is there are 3 scenarios a person can be in, right? One scenario is the debtor acknowledges the debt. Number 1, he says, yes, I agree that, I owe you this much money. He says, okay. So we're like, okay, yeah, you owe me that much money. Number 2 is that the debtor says, no, you're lying. I don't owe you any money. He denies the debt outright. He says, I owe you nothing, right? And number 3 is the debtor acknowledges the debt, but the creditor is unable to release payment from the debtor. So he's unable to get the money basically out. He's like, this guy isn't giving me money. He says, yeah, he owes me, but he's just not giving me money. And I can't do anything to get the money out of him, right? For whatever reason. We'll discuss that maybe in another thing if we get time, because there's too many reasons under that. It's too long of a process, right? So the first scenario, where the debtor says that, yeah, I'm going to give you, and I am going to give you, and I owe you, right? Okay, so I owe you. He says that, and he says, I'm going to give you, and there's nothing to say that he's not going to give you. Then debt is not considered a liability, and zakat must be given. So even though you don't have the money in your hand yet, but because you're going to get it within 1 year, you will have to give zakat on that money. You don't have it in your hand right now, but you will have to calculate zakat on that money. So some people have given money to this person and that person, and this thing going on, that thing going on. but they're saying that, yeah, we're going to give you, and they're saying it in a manner that, yeah, we're going to give you, and they're making an effort to give you, then in that case scenario, it is not considered liability, but rather it is considered as zakatable. So it means that even though you don't have it in your hand, you will have to give zakat on that debt. Debtor denies the debt. In that case scenario, the debt must be such that it cannot be established and proven. If you cannot establish and prove that debt, then and then only, right, debt is not subject to zakat. So he says, no, I'm not going to give you debt, but you have a paper and everything saying that you can go to the court and say, look at this guy, he's not giving me any money, and he signed all these papers for me. Then that can be proved, right? Or you have witnesses can prove things, right? As compared to, I don't have no paperwork, I have no witnesses, I just gave this guy some money and he's refusing to give me back, and he says that I didn't even give him any money. In that case scenario, the debt is not subject to zakat, meaning that it is not, you don't have to give zakat on that much, right? And the creditor is unable to release payment from the debtor. This guy's been saying for the past 6 years that he's going to give me money. He hasn't given me a penny, right? And he says, yeah, I'll give you. But after 6 years, that even 1 year passes by, he's not going to give you money. Or this person, he's saying that he's going to give me money, right? But at the same time, he ran away. Or I gave some person a money and he ran away. Now I can't even find him, right? I'm unable to locate this person after trying, right? Then the debt is not subject to zakat. You don't have to give zakat on it. Note, the last thing I write here about the third situation is that you should consult a qualified Islamic scholar. You should sit with them and tell them, this is a situation of my debt because of which I'm unable to get money out of the debtor. Right? I'm unable to receive the money from them. Right? Does that classify as I do not have to give? Because it's a very delicate process. There's very small things that can actually change the full masla and change the full issue into something else. Right? Now, liabilities. These are all now debts receivable. They can either be zakatable or they cannot be considered at all. But there are certain things that are deductible liabilities. You have to deduct them from your total assets, the things that you have, that you own, that are zakatable. So what are deductible liabilities? Certain things that are outstanding. For example, basic living expenses which have been invoiced but are not yet paid. For example, you have utility bills, electricity, water, things like this, and you're living in a house. Now you're going to get this bill. You're going to get this, but you haven't received an invoice, or your balance sheet hasn't been invoiced. Invoiced, what it does is, basically, to understand it, is they're actually asking you for the money now. So some places they give the water invoice 3 months, 2 months, right? So what they do is they wait 2 months. So your zakat date comes on a month that is not the invoice month, that they haven't invoiced yet, or your zakat comes 3 days before the invoice, 3 days before the actual invoice, right? Invoice is issued, right? That invoice does not count as a liability, as compared to 4 days later from that date, the invoice has been issued. Now that counts as a zakatable, that counts as a deductible liability, right? And you have to deduct that from the amount. Goods received but not yet paid for with the intention of payment. So you bought some goods from somebody, you took them, right? And you need to pay them. The same thing as it comes with credit card payments. You buy some things from there and you use the credit card and you owe the bank money. Now credit card payments you have there, you put them there, and they're invoiced, meaning they're asking you that you use that money. Now you have to pay us within a month. So what that counts is that you have intention of paying it, so therefore it will count as a liability and you subtract it. You own a business or you have employees or something like that, salaries and payable services. You had the plumber come in and the plumber fixed some things in your house. Now the plumber cost a lot of money, or you had somebody renovate your house. Now you owe them money. right? And they've invoiced you for it, meaning they're telling you that we worked for you and this is the amount you owe us. So now what? You need to pay me back. So then what you do is you use that thing. If they have installments lasting 2 years, 3 years, you do not use that. If they have installments lasting only for a couple of months, you use that. You only use installments up to 1 year, right? That's the rule. So payable things for up to 1 year. Now salaries is a bit different. Well, how? Because salary is if the person works the next month, then you will pay them. Let's say the whole month they take off, why would you pay them? Or let's say, for example, they decide to quit the job the next month, why would you pay them? So you don't calculate the salary for the whole year. You give them monthly or bi-weekly or weekly or however it works, right? For you, whatever is the thing, or every 15 days, whatever the salary is, however you decide it. So in that case scenario, right, the salaries will be only for the amount that is due right now after invoice. So they worked the previous month and you owe them the salary for that month, right? But this month has not ended, so you will calculate as a deductible liability from the zakat the amount of salary you owe, not the one that is upcoming, not the future salary. Payment of dowry if one intends to pay within the next year. So let's say you have unlimited time to pay the dowry, the mahr, but you don't intend to pay it this year but the next year, then that is not a deductible liability. But if you intend to pay it within this year, within the upcoming year, right, then it is considered as a liability, and you have to calculate that. No installment based loans that need to be paid within a year are a liability. No installment based, meaning it's a lump sum amount of cash that you need to give in one shot and there's no installment. It's not like every month give me $500. No, at the end of the year give me $7,000, $6,000 or whatever. Do you understand? Or $10,000 at the end of the year, or at the end of 6 months. So within the year, if they need to be paid, or at the end of the 1 year, that exact date of the 1 year, they need to be paid, and they're not in installments, they need to be calculated as a whole. However, let's say you have a long-term loan, right, that you have taken that is installment based, then only the 1 year's worth of installments you need to pay. 1 year's worth of installments you will need to pay, not anything else. This is on loans, right? Now, debt liability, since we talked about no installment based loans and installment based loans, something to understand is in liabilities, when we talk about debt, right, there are two types: short-term debt liability and short-term debt liability and long-term debt liability. Now, short-term debt liability are those liabilities that need to be paid within 1 year, right? So the total amount is considered a liability. The total amount of that short-term debt is considered a liability because it's within 1 year. Or you have a long-term debt liability, and in that case, in the long-term debt liability, they are generally those that span over several years, many years, maybe 5, 6, 7 years, so on and so forth. Generally, commercial loans are like that, right? As compared to a personal loan is generally short term. Give me after 2 months, 3 months, 10 months, something like that, right? 1 year's payment is considered liability, not that. Or no installment based. If the long-term loan is no installment based, then only 1 year of payment is considered, right? So it could either be 1 year's payments are considered a liability, or if it's no installment based, then at the then actually this is actually wrong here. There's an error here. If there's no installment, then only the year that of payment that you have to do. So there is no installment and I have to give it on the 5 years and I'm on year 1. So year 1, it's not a liability. Year 2, it's not a liability. Year 3, not a liability. Year 4, not a liability. Year 5, it becomes a liability, because within that year, I have to actually give this loan fully back, right? So then in year 5, this will be considered a liability. Yeah. Okay. The next thing will we'll end off here. Yeah, because we were going to talk about intention in zakah, but it's relating more towards what's coming up ahead. on how to pay zakat and actual when you're giving zakat, what to do, right? So inshallah we'll end off here, and tomorrow inshallah we'll start right back off at intention in zakat, is how to give, what intention to make, what not to make, and things like this. And there's a little bit of to talk about if you own shares in a company, how do you give how do you give how do you give zakat of the shares, and so on so forth. So shares in a company, RRSP, RESP, and likewise you have provident funds, you have different funds that you're a part of. Insurance premiums, are you giving zakat on insurance premiums or not, things like this. Inshallah, we will discuss that tomorrow. uh, in the same manner, there's another one, yeah, uh, down payments give zakat on there. You have different types of benefits: working tax benefit, child tax benefit, child benefit, social security allowances, things like this. Is zakat payable on them or not, right? Then you have to we'll talk about that inshallah. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun, wa salamun al mursalin, walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.